Hello, hello. This is Alex Burkett, and you are listening to the Long Game Podcast. In this episode, I'm chatting with Jeremy Moser. Jeremy is the co-founder and CEO of uSERP, a digital PR and SEO agency that helps SaaS brands grow awareness, traffic, and revenue. He's also the co-owner of Wordable, a SaaS tool to help you upload content drafts from, say, Google Drive to your CMS much, much faster. So that could be WordPress, Shopify, BigCommerce, etc. In this conversation, we go super, super deep on link building, which is, we've talked about it before on the show, but I don't think we've ever done one this in depth. So we talk about which tactics are working right now, which ones they're doubling down on at uSERP, which tactics are not worth the time, but they're super popular anyway, how to quantify the value and cost of a link, and what the difference is between digital PR and link building. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Jeremy Moser. So what are you working on? What do you do?
Yeah, so right now my main focus is uSERP, and we're an SEO and digital PR agency, and we mostly cater to kind of fast-growing SaaS companies, software technology for the most part. And then also on the side, growing Wordable, which is a software that my partner Brad and I acquired about 2 years ago now, a little less, I think. And so that's, one kind of diversification we've looked at, but mostly for my main focus is really the agency side of things. And so we're working with a lot of clients like Monday.com, Active Campaign, so a lot of like high growth SaaS companies to do a lot of things on the SEO front, and then also on the promotion side of things like digital PR, and landing them a lot of link placements. So we have a really big focus on content marketing, but a lot of it is geared towards SEO. So not just content creation in general, or I don't know, content marketing and SEO get lumped together all the time, but obviously they're not one and the same. And so we really do have an SEO driven focus, even when it comes to the PR side of things as well. And so that's kind of our main focus at the moment.
I want to talk a lot about uSERP and the link building and content play, but first, Wordable is interesting. So what are you working on with Wordable? And maybe talk a little bit. I know Wordable, but for anybody listening, like what's Wordable's mission and focus?
Yeah, for sure. So Wordable was started, I think maybe in like around 2017, I want to say, somewhere around that time period, by the guys at Grow and Convert. And so we had, known them for a while, had interacted with them, and we'd been a customer of Wordable since probably like, the first year or something like that it was launched, just because we do a lot of high volume content publishing, whether that's for our own sites, for clients, anything like that. So we really understood the value of Wordable. And for anyone listening that doesn't know Wordable, Wordable basically just helps you export content from Google Docs or an HTML file to your CMS. So whether that's like WordPress, BigCommerce, Shopify, anything like that, in just a couple clicks. So you save a lot of time in terms of like reformatting stuff, since the transfer from Google Docs to WordPress is super painful, just getting all those little tedious details worked out. And so we had been a customer of Wordable for a long time, knew the value there, and saw that they were just looking to sell it at one point. And it was really a good play for us too, because a lot of the customers of Wordable are pretty, reputable companies, people like Href, Stanford, a lot of high volume content publishers, kind of in the software space as well. And so we kind of just saw it as an extension to what we're already doing on the content and SEO side, and as a good fit too, as just kind of a brand project that we can move forward. And so that's been a little bit of our focus in the last year and a half or so. We've really focused on the product development there, foremost, just because it was exclusively at that point Google Docs to WordPress software. And so we've since diversified it quite a bit to cater to a bunch of different CMSs, since we see kind of a growing market there. We also don't want to be limited by just WordPress in case they, add that on their own and crush us in that sense. So that's been a little bit of a side focus for, the past year or so now.
So I'm sure it's a blend of both, but Wordable, my first thought is Wordable's got a bunch of people who are publishing at high frequency, which would probably make good clients too. Like, is that something that you think about in terms of synergizing the two businesses, or do you look at Wordable as kind of its own independent entity that you want to grow, or how do you look at the whole basket of things together?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So it's kind of a strategic acquisition in that sense. And we really saw it as aligning with what we're currently doing. So like I said, companies like Hrefs, Stanford, Kinsta using it. So a lot of stuff that's kind of in our wheelhouse in terms of what we'd create content for as an existing client and what we could see as a future one. So we did see a lot of value there in terms of like acquiring Wordable as kind of a first step and almost like a tripwire in that sense, where, we get people in the door for a lot cheaper on a software program. And then we can potentially, build a relationship there, see what their needs are in terms of creating that content that obviously needs to be published. And so we already know that they're doing so much content publishing. Maybe they need extra help there. They might need us to take over that content program for them. And then obviously more the digital PR and link building side of things is a huge component of that. And so that's definitely a strategic acquisition for us in that sense. But we're also pivoting it a little bit because we did notice a lot of the customers were kind of solo bloggers, small time publishers that are, maybe are using the tool just a couple times a month. And we really wanted it to focus on more of those high volume publishers, larger brands that are really going to see the value there. And so we've transitioned a little bit there and kind of focused more on that market as well.
Something I wanted to ask about with uSERP and link building is I notice you delineate between digital PR and link building to a certain extent. Do you look at those things differently, or what are kind of the services you offer, and how would you define kind of the PR side of things?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So a lot of it currently is super lumped in, depending on who you ask. Like digital PR and link building seem to be kind of interchanged at the moment. Maybe less so in like the UK markets. They tend to understand like the legit digital PR to a little further extent. And a lot of that is like building relationships with magazines and stuff. And so we look at digital PR and link building as kind of serving a similar goal, though kind of different strategies on how we achieve those and how we acquire, whether it's brand mentions in that sense for a PR piece, or just strictly, editorial based links that are going to kind of push towards specific pages. And so in terms of like a PR push, we really look at that in terms of creating content that we can then go out and pitch that's interesting, to cover in a journalist, in a magazine by journalists, or anything of that nature. So it's a little more, from the ground up work when we're doing digital PR versus link building, where we're mostly there focused on, acquiring links to existing content, maybe tuning and tweaking existing content to better fit some sort of search intent or something that we can pitch in that sense. So we see those as a little bit exclusive in that sense, but there's definitely overlap there and kind of the end goals of, getting more links to a site, getting more brand awareness, et cetera.
That makes sense. In my mind, there was always this image of it's like the Winnie the Pooh meme with like the normal one with link building, and then it's like Winnie the Pooh in the tuxedo and it's all fancy. And it's like digital PR.
Yeah, that's so great. That's so true. It's definitely what it has, like what the terminology has become. So it's super like necessary to kind of delineate between those two, because you're totally right. Like people hear digital PR and they just say link building, but there's definitely a little bit of a gray area there.
I mean, is it true to say that like link building tends to be a means to an end to serve SEO and content and getting rankings, where maybe digital PR has an end to its own, which is, media placements and awareness and, maybe even referral traffic back? It's like those links could be their own kind of entity. Or am I totally misunderstanding that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's really spot on. And I think a lot of the stuff of what we do does fall under a digital PR realm or scope of where we're not just trying to boost rankings for an existing piece by, getting a lot of links to it. We're really looking at kind of the full scope and the full funnel in terms of, is this a logical place to where we can get a link mention on? Will this piece, drive traffic back to that page? And that's something that we really take into account. And it's kind of a large focus of what we do is being linked on this specific page going to drive a lot of valuable referral traffic that's going to convert? And so it really does come down to that like full funnel. Does someone have conversion tracking set up on their site? Is this just like a top of the line traffic play? So a lot of that will come into play in terms of link building. And then for the PR stuff, we really do see it as, building that brand strength on its own. And obviously it's going to have trickle down benefits to like, if someone's, looking in SERPs and they see you as maybe second or third and they recognize you, maybe though there's a chance that they're going to click on that over the first person ranking. So there's some trickle down benefits there too, but there definitely is some exclusivity there and really is kind of a brand focused play when we're looking at PR on its own.
This is awesome. I can picture this in my mind because I guess this doesn't totally apply, but when I was at HubSpot, like there was such a clear, like if we build links to this pillar page, like it will rank and we will convert. And you could look at that. HubSpot obviously has brand awareness and PR play as well. So maybe imagine like a smaller SaaS company where it's pretty myopically focused on that. And then like I'm looking at my agency where we don't do a lot of SEO driven content, but we totally want more brand awareness and thought leadership.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Would you be down to dive into some nitty gritty stuff here?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to fire away. But on that note too, like we do something similar where we're not really focused on SEO driven content, especially for our own agency, just because as I'm sure you know, as people listening to this who might have a marketing agency of sorts, ranking for anything marketing agency related is like, a 5 to 10 year goal, if that. And even if that's not the goal, you can still generate a ton of brand awareness, whether that's through, thought leadership style pieces that you're publishing elsewhere. So maybe not even on your own site, whether it's, maybe not even like a guest blog, but some sort of like high level piece that you're doing on, a larger magazine or tier 1 or 2 style news source. Is really a good source of just building your brand and getting it out there. Obviously, building relationships, utilizing things like Twitter and social media, not for like just promoting stuff, but for really just building relationships at scale, is something that we've seen has been really good. Because like you said, creating SEO driven content for stuff around link building is like competing with people like Moz, Ahrefs, Backlinko, SEMrush, et cetera. And so it's kind of a really long-term focus, but not a super short-term thing for us.
Yeah, the competition is incredible. And I also had to reconcile with the fact like a lot of the search keywords that have volume don't actually attract the right audience, or like maybe it's like a very long play. If I'm to rank for what is content marketing, like how many of those 10,000 people that come into that, how many of them are going to be ready to, put $10,000 a month on the line for an agency deal? It's just such an intent mismatch there. So yeah, when it comes to thought leadership, it's more about, convincing somebody that you have credibility, authority, and expertise, and that can be done in different ways. So if I came in and I'm like, hey, we need digital PR, right? We have a couple of content assets. We've got some blog posts that rank for a couple of keywords, but mainly we're doing our podcast, we're doing webinars, we're doing some thought leadership as well with like our own frameworks. How would we start that process? Like, how would we even think about, at the starting point, like how would we think about goals? Like how would we even measure this stuff?
Yep, absolutely. It's a really good question and really multifaceted. I think the best place to start there is usually just determining what the main goals are, both in the short term and the long term. And so a lot of people come to us and there's a few different sectors of goals that they might have. So it could be a larger site where they have a ton of content published, they're ranking for thousands and thousands of keywords, maybe not, on the first page or anything like that, but they have a lot of content published, a good amount of brand strength there, and they really just need kind of a push on those pieces. They need help in terms of refining that, getting more links to those pieces, ranking a bit higher. So that's where we'd recommend more of like a link focused play. If we were doing more of something for, a brand that's up and coming or one that's just starting, where they're coming in and like you said, they have a few content assets, maybe they've got a little bit established in terms of like a funnel and they've got stuff on their site. Then we'd really focus that a little more on a PR play, since that we really can see that acquire a lot of links at scale too, and have a kind of a broader impact. But a lot of that does depend on like the goals. If we're trying to just increase overall traffic there for a specific segment of their audience to where they can, then retarget stuff based on ads, that's a different goal. If they're looking to, just build some more brand awareness and credibility in that space, what we really look at there is, first of all, do they have the budget for something like this to do it with us? Obviously, it's not cheap to create, the ideation, first of all, for some of this, to create, studies that are going to be pitched out to journalists that are going to be interesting. Things people are actually going to care about reading is what the main focus of what we try to do there on the PR side is. And not just kind of like creating assets. And we really look at that from basically a reverse engineered standpoint. So looking at, what's the segment, where are their potential target audience hanging out? There's a tool, SparkToro, which you probably know, is a good one to start to see, where is this target audience hanging out? What publications do they read? What kind of pieces are they looking through? That's where you can start to source things like journalists and different people, maybe they own sites or their own media companies for that matter. And really seeing where that audience is hanging out. And then you can also dig into that each one of those journalists personally and see, what topics do they cover? What are they interested in terms of like a publishing standpoint? What do they cover frequently? And how can we reverse engineer some of that in terms of a good topic or a good foundation for a PR style piece where it's, we're creating something interesting that we could go to that journalist and say, hey, like we did this super cool study. We found X, Y, and Z findings on, we surveyed 1,000 people in this market. We saw you've covered this before. We think this would be a cool asset for you to touch on and kind of go from there. And that's how we see a good PR play, at least coming in from like, a more newer site standpoint when you don't have some of that strength.
So I'm trying to piece this out process wise, and it sounds like it's multifold. So it's like first, figuring out your goals, which let's say in this case, it's like we want to get in front of the right people. So our target audience, and we want to convince them that we're the experts enough so that maybe they reach out and they want a consultation. So that's step number one. And then it sounds like flowing from that, step number two would be, figuring out, well, identifying that target audience, right?
Yep.
Who are those people? And then flowing from that is like, where do they hang out? What do they read? And that's where you would use something like SparkToro to get that list of, VPs of marketing read Fast Company. They listen to, Neil Patel's podcast, and they watch this YouTube channel. And then you've got kind of a list of target placements. And then flowing from that, you try to reverse engineer what they're interested in, so you can try to get on their maps.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so that kind of gives you a springboard in a sense of like, if you're getting picked up by one of these publications, makes things a lot easier in the future as well going forward. But again, we'll definitely come back to your budget, your goals, your timeline. Like if you're trying to, obviously, if you're a new company and you're, struggling to get sales in the beginning, maybe this is a shorter term play, like you need leverage quick. That's when we recommend actually a little more of like, targeted outreach towards sites maybe that are already existingly ranking for content. So maybe like you're a pet food brand or something for that matter, and, ranking for pet food, top pet food companies or top pet food brands as a whole is going to take you a year plus maybe, just for estimate's sake. And what you can do there instead is really see how you can jump the line essentially and skip that SEO wait time and maybe dominate SERPs in a different sense. So looking at what's already existing out there, who's already talking about that in terms of if you search just, best dog food or whatever, can you target some of those journalists or sites that are already covering that? Can you get listed on there? Can you get on their radar for future mentions? So where, maybe they're writing another piece about something in that space and you can get on their radar, you can give them helpful data or information. So we see this as like a multi-step approach, and it does definitely depend on kind of where you're at with a company and what your deadlines or timelines are.
Let me ask you an annoyingly dense question.
No
Once
problem.
you get these placements and these people, how do you get on the radars?
Yeah, mainly through email outreach. That's really been the biggest key. And what we see there is, email outreach is so saturated. I'm sure your inbox gets slammed on a daily basis from like all those spammy link builders out there saying, hey, I need a link for this now on this site, et cetera, et cetera. That stuff's super annoying. And
I will pay. How much do you charge?
Right. Or you get the good ones that are like, if you don't add my link, I'm going to build a million spammy links to your site, et cetera. All the,
I haven't had many of those recently.
Oh, you haven't gotten those?
In the past, that was more common, but I feel like that's slowed down a little bit, thankfully.
Yeah, thankfully. Yeah. But getting on their radar, definitely a lot of big success for us is through Twitter as well. So connecting with people just like not on a promotional or pitching basis, at least at the start, just so you're kind of building a relationship network that you have to leverage at a later time. So even if you don't have an existing client right now in a specific niche, it's still worthwhile building relationships with people at all different types of media companies, all different types of sectors, job titles, roles, et cetera, and kind of just building a network of people that you can tap into at any given point and say, hey, like, we've connected here and I know you do this and here's some cool stuff going on with this company. Maybe you want to check that out. But if you don't have that time and you're a little more in a crunch to kind of get things sped up, really what we find successful is just doing email outreach and having a clear proposition for them that's valuable. And so what we see there is just really keeping things short and sweet and not really diving into things like, here's me, here's my company, here's how cool we are, here's the funding we raised. Like a lot of people don't care about that. They just want to know what's in it for them and how they're going to push either, their own company goals forward, or they're going to look good to their boss. How are they going to, create a piece that's going to stand out within their company or the magazine that they're creating content for. And so I think really pitching there from basically a source perspective is really good. So almost like help a reporter out, except on your own and more preemptive rather than reactive to some of the stuff they're looking to source there, like on an article to article basis.
I hate those long emails. I really do. So that's a big
so
point.
bad.
And the what's in it for me is such a crucial tip. That's kind of the first question I always ask when I'm doing anything marketing related, but in particular email outreach, because you've got just a short amount of time to capture somebody's attention. Is that a Rogue fitness hat you're wearing?
It is, yeah.
Do you do CrossFit?
Yeah. I don't know, but I do some powerlifting and stuff and just love going to the gym overall. Yeah, big fitness person. How about you?
That's awesome.
I think
for sure.
I think I did read something. Maybe I think I saw it on Twitter or something. Maybe it was shared around like one of your. I think it was a fitness post during COVID or something like that.
Yeah,
if I remember
for sure.
correctly. Yeah,
that was the weirdest post I've ever written and published on my blog. It felt so odd, but I asked my co-founder, I'm like, should I publish this? kind of feels weird. He's like, yeah, dude, for sure.
No, I thought it was cool. Yeah.
This like
It's
route
awesome.
of like, 18 months of just like cutting and bulking and cutting,
Nice.
just like
Yeah.
went fully into it. So
Love it.
that
Yeah.
was a fun one. I was going to use that as an example. Say you've got a client and they're not Rogue, they're like a small up and coming player in the kettlebell space. Like maybe they've got some new technology, makes it more ergonomic or something. I don't know. The better kettlebells, right? And
For sure.
they're in that short-term mindset. They're like, all right, we've got a limited runway. We can't really like play this. Like we can't make our spokesperson into like the next Dave Asprey or like big thought leader.
Yeah.
So you identify a bunch of maybe lists of the 19 best kettlebells and like get on those lists, or is it like a little bit higher up? Because I'm struggling to think what you could pitch that wouldn't just sound like, hey, can you please put me on this list?
For sure. Yeah. So going off this example, like you're pretty early stage, you have a product, but you need sales pretty quickly. You don't have, 6 to 12 months to invest whatever, $40,000+ into a lot of PR and then a lot of push there. I'd still recommend going to those companies in those lists and trying to get on those and really just offering something like a free product in exchange. And we've seen this, work well through all different types of industries, upwards of like things like lifestyle, travel, anything where you have a physical product is actually kind of an advantage in that sense because people are very curious about a lot of these physical products. Especially if this company, for example, has products made and it's not like, pre-market or anything like that. There's a lot of opportunity to reach out there and just say like, hey, I'd love to, almost like an influencer style outreach there in the sense like, hey, I'd love to send you a free product here. I noticed you post a piece on, the best kettlebells. We think we're really competitive in this space and we'd love for you to try it out, see what you think and go from there. And we see a lot of success with that overall. And we do see that successful in software too. It's just a little more competitive.
I do find that. So I've got my own personal blog that I write some listicles on just to try to get some, extra passive affiliate income. And like I get outreach all the time. And like the ones that are the worst of those are like really long, intense ones that tell the whole company story. I'm like,
for sure.
I don't care. Right. But the ones that actually cut through sometimes they really lean in on that what's in it for me. And like I'm interested in affiliate revenue. So sometimes they're like, hey, we'll give you like an insane affiliate rate. We'll give you like 50% recurring or something like that. And I'm like, all right, you've got my attention, and then we start the conversation and kind of go from there. So yeah, I guess that's similar, but in the software space.
Yep. Yeah. And that's something we've done for Wordable to our own project is going to, some of those existing pieces out there that are saying, here's the best affiliate marketing programs that you can get into in this year. Here's the best, software companies for 2022, whatever, and going to them and saying, hey, like, what can we do for you that would make you want to add us to this list? Whether that's, giving you a maxed out free account that you can jump in there, you can play around with it for a month and see if you like it. Whether that's giving you, like you said, a really good affiliate split, that's another really good one for outreach. Anything that you can do there to kind of barter in that sense and say like, hey, what would make it worthwhile for you, and kind of just getting to the point there, like, not emailing and saying, here's our startup story, here's our life story, here's why you should care. Like nobody cares about that. Everyone's trying to build their own startup. Everyone's trying to grow their own thing. It's not cool anymore to be like a startup founder and pitch your story. People have heard, all those different types of stories. And so really just getting to the point and saying, hey, like, what can I do for you to get you to add this to your piece? Like, what would be worthwhile to you in that sense? What are you focusing on right now? What can I help with? And really just going from there and seeing if they're open to it. Some are not going to be, but for the most part, you see a lot of people are open to that and at least open to exploring your tool or your kettlebell for that matter.
And then you get in the door, right? Like then you've got a relationship to follow up on and you can kind of collaborate and further work with that person that you've built a relationship with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say if you don't see success with that right away, don't keep pinging them, asking them, just following up here, et cetera. If you do follow up, try to follow up with anything valuable if you can. So whether that's diving into their site metrics and saying, hey, like this piece is ranking here for whatever keyword. I think if you tuned it up and added these sections and maybe even suggest writing it out for them or doing the actual work for them, any way you can follow up with value is going to be better than kind of just pinging them. And even if it's not on that subject and it's something down the line that you see would be relevant for them, it's just another way to get your foot in the door and really offer something valuable to where you're not just saying like, hey, add me to this list, along with 20 other software companies or competitors that are doing the same thing.
So straightforward outreach with the what's in it for me is working. Original research and mapping out like the influencers and writers who write about that type of research, that works. You hear about link building tactics all the time. Like we've had a longevity, a long history of like different, skyscraper technique,
Yeah.
broken link building, all of these different things. What doesn't work? What is just like, this isn't worth my time in terms of link building tactics?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So it's pretty funny when I see a lot of those lists that are like 101 link building tactics for success in this year. It's like you don't need anywhere near that amount of tactics to find success with link building. You really just need maybe 2 or 3 maximum, and you need to do those 10 times better than anyone else to see a lot of success there. And so we avoid anything like broken link building, anything like that, where there's just so much data that you have to sift through to find even a few good potential targets there. Most of the time when you email them, they're just going to say, oh, thanks for pointing it out. They're going to replace it with an internal link or something like that. A lot of the time we see tactics like reaching out to a company that's covered a similar piece and suggesting yours. That's doesn't really work because you're kind of competing, even if you're not direct competitors in terms of a product standpoint. You might be competing in terms of a SERP standpoint. So that's something to be aware of when you're doing that. And so what we see to be really the most effective is narrowing down on a few of those tactics and just going all in on those. And for us, those tend to be things like contribution, so submitting fresh content that sites actually want to publish.
This is like guest posts or?
So it's kind of like guest posts. We don't call it that in a traditional sense because when you think of guest posting, it's usually like sort of spammy, like mediocre quality content done at scale. You write the piece and then you try to find an outlet that'll hopefully take it. You hopefully get that published. You maybe search like write for us and then your industry, and you just peel back the top 100 sites on there. We try to avoid all that and we just go direct to source. So we find, hey, here's like 10 companies that have cool blogs. They have, overlapping audiences. And we say, hey, like, let's do some research on our end and say, okay, this is your top 3 competitors. They're covering these 3 or 4 or 5 different types of pieces and you're not. And here's why you should be covering that. So doing essentially like a mini content gap analysis in that sense, and really looking at where they're potentially missing out on traffic, on valuable customers coming into their door, and really saving them time and money in that sense. Because we all know like how expensive it is to create actual really good content that's going to rank for those key phrases. And so if you're putting in that extra time and that effort, you're going to get really good publicity. You're going to get a lot of those links there that normally would be unreachable, or normally you'd have to have some sort of crazy connections there from the past to get in those doors. So we see that as being a really effective tactic that we've 10x our not double down, but 10x down on. And then another one there would be really that kind of study and original research focus. We've done that for our own companies, for clients as well. We often see, a single study generating hundreds and hundreds of unique root domains, all within, a DR 60 plus via Ahrefs. So DR is not like foolproof, but it's a good tripwire for anyone listening. So it gives you kind of a good base level assessment of how strong a site is. But we've seen, original research be really key if done correctly. But again, it is a little more of a long-term play, a little more expensive to put into action. And it's a little slower to take effect than maybe just going for outreach, but we do see it netting far more high quality links, at least in the long term.
I mean, my sense is that the tactics that work tend to be a little bit higher barrier to entry. It's not anybody can get a list of broken links or like images or like these various plays, unlinked brand mentions, but like it's almost so easy to do that there's so much noise there. Whereas if you come out and you've got 10 target publications and then actually produce like world-class content for them, which is not easy or cheap to do, like that stands out. And the same thing with original research. It's really fucking hard to produce original research that's interesting, right? So it's like you're almost going, you're like aiming higher than others are. So you kind of stand out because there's fewer people in that sphere.
Yep, absolutely. And I say this a lot too. Like people say, link building outreach is getting really tough. Like no one's responding to my emails. And that's kind of music to my ears when I hear that, because it's kind of, people think it's bad that there's a lot of outreach, that it kind of creates like a spammy feel in the industry. But it also makes you, if you're doing the outreach correctly and you're doing it well, stand out that much more. So when you're emailing and you're contacting with a journalist or a site or, a company or a site owner for that matter, it's a lot easier to stand out if you're actually, putting in the work behind the scenes. You're actually creating a piece of content that you would publish yourself, and not one that you're kind of just, writing, shoving a bunch of links in there, and then, spraying and praying and hoping that that gets published somewhere down the line. So really taking that like custom approach is really what we see work best.
I want to ask about the value of a link, and this is a hard question. And I've got kind of multiple questions here, but I think like link building, the people who do it understand that it's very valuable and very expensive. But I think in the industry, there's probably a lot of bad information and bad expectation setting, because you get outreach from people. They're like, I've got a list of 200 sites, and you look at the cost per placement, and it's like $200, $300, et cetera. So I guess the first question is, with these more expensive tactics, right? Like you're writing a guest post, you're doing the outreach almost like an account manager would, not necessarily like a virtual assistant, spray and pray type thing.
Yeah.
Do you have some idea of how much a link costs you to get? And do you have some target that you want to like keep within? Or like, I guess, how do you like quantify the value of or the cost and the value of a link that you would charge a person?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and really kind of depends on the circumstance that we're working within, and then also the kind of quality and approach there. So, if we're doing something that's like strictly driven by a PR, we typically do like a price per project style thing, where we're taking into account obviously the amount of time that we're putting in this, the creativity that's going on here, and the deliverables. But if it's more of like on a per link basis, and what seems to be a good target there for us, a good way to look at that is really how much is it going to cost you on your own to do this in-house. So we do a lot of comparisons there in terms of like, okay, to build links is really a full-time job. And a lot of people hire for like an overall SEO person. There's so many facets of SEO that like you can break each one of those buckets down into a full-time job, and link building is included in that. There's just so much legwork that goes into it in terms of qualifying different sites that might be a good fit for you, finding the right contact person at that site. Because if you're emailing the CEO of HubSpot and you're asking for a link, obviously that's never going to get returned. You're never going to hear back. So finding the right person there, getting their email, coming up with a good idea, a good pitch there, maybe doing a content gap analysis on a per site basis. A lot of this is really time sensitive and time driven, not including the actual cost that it may cost you to pay someone to write that piece, or write it in-house for that matter. And again, these pieces are upwards of 2,000 words, probably on average. They go deep into topics and sections. They're heavily, edited throughout the process with any given site that you're working with. There's a lot of stages of editing there. So a link can end up really costing anywhere from like, $500 per to, maybe even up to 2,000 per, depending on what's going on behind the scenes. How difficult is a piece to create for this certain type of site or piece of content? What's the editorial process there? What kind of, background processes are going on there is really what's going to factor in there. And I think it's often even a multiple person job is what we see if you're really going for the cream of the crop of links, and you're really trying to get those good placements. It takes a lot of effort from multiple parties and multiple decision makers in your company to move things forward. And it's also kind of obviously an advantage to outsourcing. Is you really you're paying almost always on a deliverable basis rather than a time driven basis. And your time to results are obviously going to be a lot shorter if you're going with an outsource route versus kind of coming up with a lot of this in-house and going through a lot of those bottlenecks that you'll figure out doing some of this.
Yeah, that resonates. We do a little link building as part of our content packages at our agency. And something I was thinking about a couple months ago is like, the margins on links are probably the worst. And there's no real, like, how do I answer for this? And like, there's a couple things we, thought through. We're like, well, can we take the efforts we're putting in right now and maximize like the outputs? Like, could we, we've got a guest post target. Could we be a regular contributor to that blog? So basically that cuts down the marginal cost of the time we put into the relationship, right? We get more out of it, even though there was a set amount of time we took to get in the door. There's Definitely. Like, can we partner with other people, and link to them in those guest posts? And then like we build relationships with them, and like maybe we squeeze 3 links instead of 1 link out of 1 guest post. But then Definitely. The easiest answer, the one that came to me latest, oddly enough, was, why don't we just charge more for links? Like, even though there's other people that are charging so little, like that's not right. Like, we shouldn't anchor to those price points. We should anchor to the value that these are actually providing. Right. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. That's something that we do too, is really value driven pricing. And a lot of it will depend on like the type of client that we're working with too. And like, if we're driving links to a really bottom of the funnel page that's heavily conversion driven, if you're getting a link to that type of page on a really high traffic site, let's say a target site does like 2 million organic visits per month. and they have an existing piece of content that's ranking for whatever, and you get a link on that page, you're probably going to be driving upwards of, a couple thousand visits per month to that specific piece that you're linking to. We've seen that on the back end with analytics, et cetera, and seeing like tons of referral traffic can come in from just a single link on a high traffic piece, especially if it's coming from a good, reputable site. And that's worth a ton of money in terms of both ad spend and then also the conversion trickle down that you'll get from some of that, especially depending on the company that you're working with. And if the conversion is low ask, whether that's like getting someone to sign up for a newsletter on that page, or it's more bottom of the funnel where they're actually signing up for like a product demo or something like that. I mean, driving, 1,000+ qualified leads to a specific page per month with a single link is something we see often. And I mean, that's super invaluable. And if you're doing that, you should not be charging $300 or something like that per link. You should really take into account, obviously, the business size, the business goals, and what a single conversion might mean to them in terms of their bottom line revenue.
Yeah, I love that. Do you, so like these tactics right now, they're working, but the industry changes, it evolves. Like we know guest posts can work now. We know original research can work now. Maybe it won't in the future. So do you think about, keeping an open mind with regards to experimentation with new tactics, or, how do you think about like the trial and error and iteration when it comes to this line of business?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've experimented with a lot of different types of link building and we've really centered on those too. But again, like you said, stuff changes pretty quickly here. Maybe in 3 or 4 years, like a lot of this won't still be around, or maybe it'll be around, but in some sort of different capacity. And we see that as a definite possibility. And our main focus really there has just been relationships that will stand the test of time. That's the biggest thing for us is really just relationship building at scale is essentially our main priority at all times. Because if you don't have relationships, if you don't have connections, like the amount of people that are moving into the SEO space is increasing rapidly, especially in the last 2 years or so. If you look at like a Google Trends, data plot from the survey or the people searching for like SEO in general or SEO services, anything like that for that matter, just absolutely skyrocketing in the last 2 years. I don't see that slowing down anytime soon, especially with changes in ads and all that on the Facebook side, et cetera. And so a lot of what we do is really, again, relationship building at scale, and how can we build relationships that are mutually beneficial for years to come, rather than us just saying like, hey, this is a short-term relationship. We're going to publish here for 2 months. We're going to try to squeeze them for all we can for, a short-term profit on our side, for short-term client wins. We're really focusing on, how can we be a consistent contributor with them? How can we, be ahead of trends with them in terms of like, maybe they're even filling us in 6 months, we want to cover these topics. Like, can you produce any research here that could benefit this, to where we're a good, first go-to source for them for some of this, rather than being more reactive in that sense and kind of just hoping that they're going to publish content for us.
Man, I love that. The relationship focus resonates so much. We're trying to hire like a new digital PR manager, and I had to really like sit down and think like what's the core archetype or like the kind of job roles that this person fills, because there's obviously a lot that you can include in a job description or your evaluation. And I kind of honed it in to like one is systems approach, like systems thinking, especially in client work. Like you've got so many different moving pieces and writers, and you've got like kind of accounts, so to speak, like publications, and there's just a million things going on, and like tracking your like cost per link and like the value and all of these different things. And then there's kind of just like scrappiness or proactivity, because it's like you can't really like wait for these things to come. You got to just like fire off emails, and you got to just like put yourself out there. But that last piece, I said they should be an account manager. Like it's really it's like an account manager that just loves the people component to it. And I think that's probably the most critical now in retrospect.
Yeah, definitely. And you can kind of think of it too, of like the whole account-based marketing thing that was, really hyped in the past, 5-10 years, where it's like you're really doing this on an account level, and you're giving priority to specific sites, even if you don't have a relationship with them. You have to understand that there's obviously a cost there in terms of your time and your effort, and not all of that's going to work out. But if you secure something like that for the long run, the ROI there is just potentially massive and almost infinite in that sense, to where it is worth it in that to put in that time and effort early on to build some of those relationships. Whereas a lot of people in link building tend to be really day-to-day focused in that, okay, I need these people to respond. I need them to get this link for me placed now. Whereas if you're, sinking a bit of time and even money into that relationship at the start, it might cost you $500, $1,000, $2,000 of time or effort. But in the future, if you're publishing whatever 10, 20, 30 pieces with that given site and you're getting a lot of publication press there, that's potentially worth 10x that amount that you're spending there in the short term. So it's really having that long-term mindset, I think, and really having someone that is really people focused, whether that's, been directly in PR or even just in relationship building overall, is someone that I see could transition really well to a PR role. So we see that a lot too. Like if you're hiring, not necessarily even looking for someone with direct experience in digital PR or something like that, or link building or SEO for that matter, just seeing if someone can build relationships if they can build relationships with people. Are they a good communicator? Do they have that kind of soft skill set that's really critical in this space? Is something that we see a lot. And then you can always obviously systemize, train people up, because how you do things is going to be super different to how other people do it anyways. They're going to have a learning curve, and really documenting a lot of those processes on your own can help you bring people in and then train them up to be someone that's really successful in that type of role.
Something you said at first was the account-based thing. It's funny, I've had a draft sitting in my Google Drive for like 6 months with a title account-based link building. Nice. And I've been wanting to write this piece forever. And
yeah, just haven't spot on.
Solidified my thoughts, but yeah, it sounds like we've got a similar approach there.
100%. Yeah, I'll look forward to reading that. That's like the exact term that I was thinking in my head. So that'll be super cool to see some more of your thoughts on that.
What do you believe to be true about content marketing and digital PR that most people would disagree with you on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So a lot of people seem to think that content marketing, at least at the start, is really SEO driven. And I see it as more than just an SEO play. So what I mean by that is, like, not every content piece that you create has to be ranking for a given keyword. And actually, most of the best link building and PR pieces are not driven towards ranking for a specific keyword. They're actually, maybe more survey based, or they're more maybe just a keyword that people are not searching, but just an overall topic area that people are interested in. And we see a lot of that as like trickle down opportunity to other stuff you're working on. So for example, like a lot of people might think, okay, we need to publish more content this month. That means we need to do more keyword research, but maybe not necessarily. Maybe that means we need to figure out what people care about in our space. What are they talking about? And how can we kind of capitalize on some of that? And then how can we also predict some of that future trend so that we're not, just capitalizing on what's existing out there, but how are we kind of creating a mindset or a narrative shift that goes towards the future of these topics? And so we see a lot of that in content and PR, and we see really good success in terms of like creating content that's, not keyword driven, but can still acquire a lot of press. And then you can always funnel a lot of that, cringy link juice that people like to talk about into, other pages on your site, and really funnel that down. So even if the content is not from an SEO perspective, you can still generate huge SEO results from it. It just kind of requires a little bit of a shift in how you view that content. Maybe it's not keyword driven in that sense, but it's really brand building focused, and brand building stuff really acquires a ton of links at scale. And so that's something to be, cautious of and really focused on going forward, at least for people in the content space.
Totally. Like even for our most ardently SEO focused clients, like we try to keep a basket open for what we call buzzworthy content, which may or may not be focused on a keyword. It could be appended, but like the main focus is to garner buzz, so to speak. It's, it could be links, it could be attention, it could be social shares, but keep that basket open so it's not purely just keyword driven stuff. And then we've got our thought leadership clients that, don't really care if they rank in search, and that's a little different of a story. But I think even the most mature companies, even the HubSpots, the Unbounces of the world, would benefit by keeping a small basket open, where there's a little bit more exploration, a little bit more like unpredictability and uncertainty. Because like you said, absolutely, that stuff fuels it's the engine by which like all of your SEO driven stuff can rank in the first place. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, if you look at where Google rankings are kind of shifting these days, it's really, we've seen this time and time again. It's just big brands that have awareness, that have a lot of links. They have a lot of links because they're generating a ton of awareness and people are talking about them online. And so links are really kind of just an extension of your brand in terms of like, we like to think of it as almost like a Yelp review or something, or a Google review for that matter, to where each time you're acquiring one, it's just another benefit to you in terms of like, if someone's looking at this and they see that you have 500 reviews from 5-star, and it's all 5-star ratings, like that's really powerful for your brand. And when someone's looking at that, reading that piece, they're more likely to click on that. They might remember you from, your brand being mentioned in all these different types of places. And so we really see links as just a brand building effort overall. And a lot of that does overlap into the PR side too.
I love that. Well, Jeremy, we're coming up on time. I actually wish we had like another hour or two because I feel
Yeah,
like we haven't even touched on a lot of the link building and even outside like SEO and content stuff.
for
But
sure.
time is time.
Yeah.
Is there anything I didn't ask you or something we didn't talk about that you wanted to explore here?
I don't think so, but I'm totally down anytime to dive more into the link building stuff. Anything about Wordable, Twitter stuff is cool too. I recently picked that up last year, and it's kind of been crazy there. And I can share like how that's helped, at least from an agency perspective, and like brand building in that sense.
Were you doing
So
like you're trying to post on Twitter to drive awareness for the agency?
yeah, so I started posting on Twitter. I can dive in super quick before our time runs out.
Mm-hmm.
I started in January of last year, so a little over a year ago now. Had a little bit of downtime, had like a minor surgery, so I was going through, I was just like sitting around doing nothing, and was just recovering. And I was on the couch and reading Twitter. I'd signed up maybe in 2017 and posted one thing and never looked at it again, probably like most people, but it's kind of had a resurgence in the last year. So I just started posting on there, like stuff that I was doing at my agency at the time. So, whether it was good things that were happening, like scaling up the amount of clients we were taking on, or MRR growth, or company growth overall, or even the things that weren't working, like things that we had tried that had failed, and minor failures for the company. Just kind of sharing things that were going on, just because I thought it was interesting. I saw other people doing it, and I thought it was really cool. And so that's created like a little bit of a transparency level there, and really helped me launch some more brand initiatives. And so since then, Twitter has just grown like crazy for me, and has been a really good source of, again, building long-term relationships there for both the company needs, but then also securing business, and really just, meeting people that have a need for this stuff. And a lot of people in this technology space, SaaS, that's kind of like our main focus is really on Twitter. And we see this as a really good potential channel for us to where, we can post genuinely helpful stuff. We can really focus it on a brand instead of just posting an article like link on Twitter and hoping people click it. So we're really focused on kind of like the brand building aspect of Twitter, and really just generating like personal brand strength that we can then leverage into some of these other opportunities.
Man, I almost regret asking that because now I want to explore that. 'Cause we're doing it at Omniscient as well. Like all of
Nice.
us, the co-founders, are kind of like expanding our Twitter presence and also LinkedIn. It's a new experiment.
Yeah.
So if you're down, we could do another session and talk more about that stuff and about
Yeah, man.
Wordable and all the
Yeah.
other things.
Super down. Yeah, I'm down anytime. Just let me know.
Cool. So I guess to wrap up then, where should people go to find you online? Twitter, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. It's J Moser with 2 R's at the end. So JMOSERR. That's probably the best way to reach me. I don't really use LinkedIn too much. So probably not best to hit my inbox there, because there's a million spammy DMs asking me to jump on calls. But you can also reach me at uSERP.io. I think my email is publicly listed on there if you want to chat. Yeah, so that's probably the best two ways to find me. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. I swear LinkedIn is all like what would you do if you could have 5 extra leads per week and like animated videos? That's like those are the only
message.
2 DMs.
Yeah, totally.
Well, awesome. Thanks so much. This was super fun.
Yeah, likewise, man. Thanks for having me.